here, and I have a list of questions, but for people who have questions out there on Zoom, please feel free to go to the chat function and, and type your questions, and then Nicole will send them on to me, and I can ask them in real time. So don't hesitate. Any question we're interested in hearing, and as they say, the only dumb question is the question that is not asked. So why don't we just start off, Cody? How are you feeling today? We saw a lot about what happened to you in the past and how it affected your hockey career, but how does RYR1, how does MH affect you today on a daily basis? Is this something you think about on a daily basis, or just give us a sense of how you deal with it right now?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Goldberg. I feel well. These days, I'm completely off dantrolene unless I need to use it. So in the past, it was prescribed to me to help with some of the muscle cramps and the other issues that I was having, was about 4 pills a day. And then I got down progressively down to 3, 2, and 1. And now I'm off it. I just take it as needed. So I try to limit what I do, physical and physically, sorry. But for the most part, everything's, back to normal other than, being able to play competitive sports.
So when you say as needed, what would be a circumstance? Would you take it prophylactically before, or would it be after? So what when you say as needed, give us an example of.
Well, I usually like to do it after. I don't like to be on it. I find some of the side effects make me a little bit loopy and not all there. So I try to avoid it as much as possible. But if I do some kind of light workout and it triggers it accidentally, or if I'm doing something that might be a little bit raises my temperature too much, then I can feel it coming on. I feel that little bit of a reaction happening. So then I'll go back and take part of a pill. I won't do a whole pill unless I obviously have really overdone it.
And is it pretty consistent? Meaning, if you do a certain type of workout that it will provoke symptoms, or is there a randomness that's hard to predict?
It's pretty predictable now. I don't like to sit idle too long, so I was kind of pushing the boundaries even while I was trying to recover, just trying to see what I could do. And at the beginning, walking up steps would trigger it. So talking with some of the experts and knowing that I had to pare back a lot of the activity for my body to be able to heal. And then it's a threshold. So the longer you go without triggering it, it's going to help it. As soon as you trigger it, it's going to revert.
Now, one of the questions that we had from the audience was, have you made any changes to your diet? Does nutrition or diet seem to affect how easily you develop symptoms or the severity of the symptoms that you may have? Has that been an issue for you at all?
Well, I can tell you from the perspective of my playing days versus non-playing days that my diet's had to change. I'm not taking in quite as many calories. Right. Otherwise, I'd be a lot bigger than I am, but not muscular. The actual diet that I'm on daily, I haven't found too much that can trigger it. I have other family members, but this is all anecdotal stuff, so I don't want to give any advice or anything like that based on my diet. I haven't specifically noticed any different or for certain foods that would trigger it, but that's not to say that it might not be the case.
Okay. So you mentioned in the documentary that this MH, you knew about the history of MH in your family. Can you talk a little bit about how MH has manifested in other members of your family? What kind of symptoms they have?
Sure. So, like I said earlier, we thought the malignant hypothermia was an allergy to anesthesia. So, when my parents, my dad went to get surgery, or my uncles or aunts, they all had to be tested, and they were positive with it. So every time they were going to have some kind of surgery routine thing, they would have to notify the doctors, get in first, make sure they're not getting the drugs that's going to trigger the reaction. So I just followed the same protocol as that. My sisters and brother as well, even though they may not have it, we just assumed that we had it because we didn't want to do the full testing, and that just made life a lot simpler. Except what we didn't know was that there's other things that could trigger it as well that weren't necessarily the anesthesia.
Right. And I think you've told me in the past that members of your family who are affected tend to be a little more muscular, a little stronger than the other people in the family. Is that true?
Yeah, just by appearance wise, we're a little stockier and seem to build muscle quicker. That's one thing that we notice in my immediate family, the people that have it versus the people that don't.
And what's interesting is that I would say at this point it's more than anecdotal. There have been some articles, and actually I saw that one of the doctors who's uh, one of the world's leading experts on this, Dr. Vermans in the Netherlands, she's actually watching right now. She has followed a group of patients with RYR1 who are elite athletes, maybe not professional athletes, but high functioning uh, athletes, very muscular, very strong. I've met patients who they run marathons, they were collegiate athletes. So there does seem to be a link between certain RYR1 mutations that seem to be associated with MH and increased strength, increased muscularity. So it's a very interesting connection and I remember talking to one of your sisters when she would see your father moving furniture or something, they would say that's the MH. They associated MH with increased strength.
Yeah, we were able to build muscle a lot more rapidly. Like it would be 2 weeks, and we could noticeably notice a huge difference in the muscular structure. At least in my case, it didn't take me very long to really bulk up. So I try not to lift too many weights, just because I would get a little overly muscular, which isn't the best for hockey.
Right, right, which is an amazing. I mean, when you think about the spectrum of conditions for RYR1, most people, we think, um, are presenting with muscle weakness. So to hear about someone with a mutation in the RYR1 gene that has a problem with building up too much muscle is, it's probably very confusing for people, but that just tells you that depending on the mutation that you have, where on the RYR1 gene you have that mutation, is going to determine the kind of signs and symptoms you have. So, Cody, in the movie, you mentioned that you had not talked about the circumstances of your retirement uh, to really many people. Certainly not reporters, the fans didn't know, the bloggers didn't know. And in the movie, you mentioned that there was an insurance issue that prevented you from telling people what was going on. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So when I was originally going through these issues, I had my agent. He mentioned that there's insurance clauses if you can't play, that it's a disability insurance type thing. Doctors have it, that type of thing. Um, and so after consulting with the disability insurance lawyers and company, we really couldn't talk about what was going on in the media, because I really didn't have a lot that was concrete. I didn't want to put something out there that was going to be faulty, that really wasn't the case, that might skew things or mess up. You really didn't want to. If it went to some litigation, then I didn't want to have any of that stuff pulled out that wasn't correct. So I didn't want to first of all spread something that wasn't true, and then also kind of give information that wasn't relevant. And I really didn't think people wanted to hear too much about professional athletes that couldn't play hockey anymore.
Right.
From my perspective, I didn't think people would be really interested in hearing my story about how I wasn't able to play anymore. So I figured most people were on the other side. They want to know about people doing well and
No,
scoring goals, that type of
people.
thing.
I think you've realized that people actually were very interested. So just to be clear, you were talking about disability insurance, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
And I think that's an important distinction for people to understand that you have health insurance, and at least in the United States, right now, pre-existing conditions or conditions you have cannot be used against you in terms of your ability to get insurance. But things like disability insurance and life insurance, that is a different category. And sometimes people's pre-existing conditions can in fact be used against them. Either they won't get disability insurance, or their premiums will go up. And so it sounds like there were some concerns that you had with disability insurance, and I know that got resolved, but I just wanted to highlight that for people. So let me ask you this. So now that you have told people, whether it be through this movie, conversations you've had with family, reporters, does it feel different now that you've told people? And a lot of people at RY1 do keep it a secret, or they try and hide it. And in some ways, you were doing the same thing, maybe for different reasons. Um, Now that you've been outed, or you've outed yourself, or you've come out, whatever, however you want to portray it, How does it feel? Does it feel different? Is it a weight off your shoulders, or is it not really any different for you?
Yeah, I think it helps more for the fans and for other people that don't know me or in my direct circle. The people that have been in my life for the last 4 years have always kind of known what was going on a little bit with me personally. So I have kind of a smaller inner circle of people that I let in. But so I was happy that they all knew early. But now, as more fans and people and media have been reaching out, wondering, what happened to my back, or what was it, like an issue that I previously had while playing that had made me stop, or I just retired out of the blue. Um, or I've had some people ask me about a blood condition. So I don't know what's in Google or what's it saying about me, but
Right.
no, I'm happy to be able to give more information that's more accurate too. And I found just by talking about it, people have come forward that have similar symptoms. That's been the most rewarding part of this, is that people from all over the world have messaged me, whether Facebook or Instagram or through you guys at the foundation, and been able to help a few different patients that at least in their feedback have given me after I've spoken with them, that some of the stuff that we suggested has helped them. So that's the most important. And when you approached me originally to do this documentary, I wasn't too sure about why I wanted to talk more about myself. So that's not really something that I'm too keen on doing. But it's after doing this and having the feedback and people come back and say how much it helps them, it's made it more rewarding.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. And actually, that was going to be one of my later questions, but why don't we just jump into it? You mentioned that you have spoken with other people with similar symptoms from RYR1. Can you talk a little bit about how the foundation has facilitated that? So how do you hear about these people, and what are the things you talk about, and how does that? How do you think that's helping those people that you talk to?
Well, just from the feedback that we've gotten, recently about some of the patients that they were experiencing similar things. They saw a documentary or they saw clips of it that, some of the symptoms that I was presenting, and they had similar things that no one could really tell them about. And I know that struggle. I went basically a year without knowing what was going on and being tested for a litany of different things that weren't accurate, and being on a bunch of different treatments and maybe 4 or 5 different pills to try to stop one symptom, but it wasn't stopping the other thing. And then finally, when I got hooked up with Dr. Riazzi, she was able to give me something that worked for everything. And just knowing what it is probably the most, probably takes the largest weight off. And that's something that I was, fortunate to be able to pass on to some of these other people that have tested now positive for MH. They've come forward, and then the RYR1 Foundation facilitating that was able to hook them up with the proper doctors and testing and get them. Some doctors wouldn't prescribe dantrolene. Some of them wouldn't do the testing for MH. So, really have to, hand to your wife, Lindsay, for facilitating all that and making sure all that gets done. Because without her, I don't know if that's really possible. So I'm happy to have this partnership with you guys, that if this generates a little bit of attention and people see this and they have similar symptoms, or they know people that have similar symptoms, that through the RYR1 Foundation, they're able to get some help.
Yeah, well, yeah, you've been fantastic, and you mentioned Lindsay, my wife, and she's been fantastic as well. So, for people who are out there who don't know Lindsay, or maybe who have MH symptoms and they want to talk to someone, um, email us, email Nicole. Lindsay, my wife, is a nurse, and she is our patient liaison for the foundation. And so, if you have, we are not a healthcare organization, but if you have questions and you want to talk to someone, Cody's been fantastic in talking to people with MH-like symptoms, and so we're happy to facilitate that. As long as Cody's still willing, we're happy to make those connections, and it's been really helpful. A lot of people have come to us with, we had a nurse who couldn't work anymore. She had so much cramping, and I think she talked to Cody and some other people who really struggled. And I think it's one thing to talk to doctors, but it's equally rewarding, gratifying, maybe even more so, to talk to another affected individual who can really understand what you're going through. I want to shift gears a little bit, Cody. You talked about in the documentary when you had to stop playing because of the diagnosis. That was a tough transition, I think is what you said. But you also mentioned that you felt blessed by the career that you had. And I think a lot of people are really, I'm really impressed by that attitude. It's a very positive attitude. And I'm wondering if you always had that positive attitude, or did you ever go through a phase when you talked about that tough transition of the why me phase? Why did this happen to me? Some people certainly in your line of work get injuries that end their career. In your situation, it was an inherited genetic condition that ended your career. So did you ever go through that why me phase? And if you did, how did you get out of it? And if you didn't, why not? That would have been a very normal response.
Oh, thank you. Well, first, I couldn't look at it like that. I felt if I looked at it like something was being taken away from me, that I would get down, and I didn't really want to go living my life thinking that I was missing out on something. So I just looked at it like there was a lot of people that didn't have malignant hyperthermia, didn't have the RYR1 disorder, and they weren't able to play hockey. And that's their life. Growing up in Canada, you're surrounded by hockey, and everyone wants to be a professional hockey player when they grow up. So to have even one game is pretty special. Never mind a full 6 years playing in the National Hockey League, playing for 3 different teams, and traveling the world and get to play a sport that I love. So I don't know if complaining about that would get me very far. Um, but I actually was kind of fortunate at 19, and I say fortunate because most people wouldn't say that. I got injured for an entire year. I wasn't able to play, and the doctors didn't know what was going on with me. I had torn a multifidus muscle off my spine, and the doctors couldn't find it. It's such a small area, but it was a rather large hole that took a long time to try to recover from. And when I was able to come back, it was basically like a second career. I was basically told earlier that I should stop playing. The doctors, saw that I couldn't tie my shoes, I couldn't bend over, and walking on a treadmill would cause everything to seize up. So it was looking at someone who could barely do those things and thinking they should try to play hockey professionally in the National Hockey League is almost like two different things. So I was fortunate to be able to come back, and I got some really good help with Gary Roberts and the doctors and training staff there, and work with some really good players. Really good medical staff with the Canucks and then the Sabres later on, and they're able to help me throughout my career. So I was really fortunate to play at all. That's the way I looked at it. To have any time after missing a year of hockey, never mind when you're 19 years old, to come back and be able to play was pretty special. I just made sure I enjoyed it. So I kind of had an idea that I don't think a lot of hockey players or athletes in general have an idea then it's going to stop. I think everyone thinks they're going to play for 20 plus years and sail off into the sunset and play forever. So I had that idea in the back of my mind that it could literally be over the next day. So I just made sure I lived and took in all the sights in different cities and made a lot of good friendships. So obviously it's a disappointment that I'm not able to keep. I would love to keep playing. I still am a fan of hockey. I still love the game.
Right.
But I have those memories. I'm still around the game now. I still work for the Nashville Predators. They're very fortunate. I was very fortunate to get a job right away after being done, and gave me something to think about and try to build and be a part of that organization and help grow the state of the game in Tennessee.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's really interesting. So the injury early on in the career sort changed your outlook in a way and said this could end at any minute. So the fact that you had 6 years, that was an incredible run. So along those same lines, the thing that fascinates me about your story, and when Dr. Riazzi told me, and just to take a step back, it was Dr. Riazzi who put us together. I mean, obviously she diagnosed you, and she had worked with me on the foundation, and so we had this mutual connection. And I think, given how unique your story was, but also given your personality and how eloquent you are, she really thought you would be a good person for us to get to know, and I think she was right. But from what I heard about this story about a pro athlete who had to retire from because of RYR1, it was just an amazing story to me. It was as I tell people, you don't just stumble into the NHL by accident. You were, and as you mentioned in the documentary, it's your whole life. I mean, this is what you work for. This is like the chairman of surgery at Harvard not being able to operate because of rheumatoid arthritis, or a professional opera singer losing their voice, right? I mean, this is, and so it's really an amazing story, and your attitude and how you've approached it has been inspirational to me. And so I'm wondering if you had any advice for the people who are watching right now, or the people who watch this documentary. What would you tell them for someone who's sitting at home with RYR1 who maybe had a career cut short, or a missed opportunity, or a dream not realized. And obviously, maybe we're not talking about professional sports, we probably aren't, but maybe it's a school or a different career. Um, People who are sitting at home saying, why me? Um, you've navigated that very well. So, what kind of advice would you give to that person who is maybe dealing with those feelings of frustration or even depression related to this mutation that they have?
Yeah, it is. It is depressing. It is frustrating. You can't just ignore those feelings. Like me, I'm sure they've dedicated a lot of their lives or a good portion of their lives to learning those skills that now can't be attained anymore, can't be shown in full form. So I don't want to ever minimize any of that stuff. So what those people are going through is really rough, and I sympathize with them. And there's definitely a time for that. I don't think you can go through it without thinking about those things and feeling a bit of loss. So I wouldn't say that I've completely, you know, transitioned away from if I'm not missing the game, not wanting to play, but I found that looking forward to other things that you enjoy is kind of like a second chance to learn things that you never would have done, or even a different capacity. Like in my case, working with kids and be able to stay around the game, or becoming a coach or general manager or something that you wouldn't be able to do if I was playing, but it still keeps me, around hockey. I still lived and breathed every minute of it. So still know the game, still able to contribute the way that I feel like, I have the knowledge and that base, but physically I'm not able to use those skills. So I think we just have to adapt. And we talked about it a little bit in the video, but if you're a hockey player that had these things taken away, or if you've, and we do some work with the military and the wounded warriors and the guys that come back that were hockey players that were also in the military, and they've had something, a limb taken off or something that it's a horrible injury, but they're still able to play. They adapt, they maneuver, and they just figure out a way to get it done that allows them to enjoy it. They don't let other things set them back, and that's, to me, the most inspiring stories. The guys that have these impediments that most people would see as being something that really holds them back, but these guys don't see it that way. They see it's just a challenge to figure out a way to get on the ice and a different way to do things. The little guy in the video with his Jackson there, he's done a great job of adapting. He's found a new way to enjoy the game, and still follows hockey and still lives and breathes it, but he does it in his own way. So that's the type of spirit that I look forward to and seeing more of.
Absolutely. And, one thing I remember when we talked in Pittsburgh at the family conference, I think you had mentioned that you look, there's some hockey players that they don't know how to retire. They know nothing else other than hockey, and they're struggling to stay in the league. And you actually felt bad for them that they haven't been able to find something else that's meaningful to them. And so I think what you said about either adapting or finding something else, something that you're passionate about or interested in, is the way to go. So we have a bunch of questions here online that have been sent to me. Let me just read here. Cody, what has been the biggest blessing in disguise in your journey? Is a question we have here.
I think the biggest blessing in disguise has been able to spend more time with family. The first year that I was diagnosed with this, I was on, like I said earlier, dantrolene pills for a day, which I really wasn't able to do much. So you're not allowed to drive cars, or weren't allowed to exercise. I couldn't go for a run or jog. Or my whole lifestyle of working out every day and doing something that involved hockey had to be completely shut down. So I actually came home for a while, and while I was waiting for results and different tests and things, and just being around family, spending more time that I spent. I left home at 18, 19 to go live in these other cities, and I never got to spend a lot of time with my two younger sisters and older brother that went away to college when I was younger. So just spending more time around them was a nice blessing.
Okay. Another question here. Other than physical activity, we know that anesthesia would be a trigger for you, and you've mentioned physical activity, working out. Any other triggers that you're aware of in your experience? Hot weather, anything like that?
Yeah, there was a whole list that was given when when you're diagnosed positive for MH, they give you a list right from the hospital. It says, you have these symptoms. Be aware that this has all been shown to cause these same effects. And just going through the list, I think it was high heat environments. So, obviously you don't want to spend a whole lot of time outside of the beach. So I monitor that, or, really humid baseball stadiums, that type of thing. So I'll just have to pick spots of, how much time I'm spending in the sun, getting too hot. Prolonged physical activity. So that's, long runs, that type of thing I try to avoid. I tried to avoid them before, but I had to do it for my job. But now I have an excuse not to go for long runs. I'll really push it. The other stuff, high stress environments. Not sure really how to avoid those, but sometimes you don't put too much stress. It's unwarranted on yourself.
Yeah, right.
There's a few other things too. I think it was going from hot to cold or cold to hot really quickly. Has also done it. I don't have the sheet around me, but I remember those four because it was something that I had to change my lifestyle. The other stuff I didn't really have to change my lifestyle with, excessive alcohol or drugs or any of that stuff. So,
All right. Okay.
I didn't really worry about it.
Question here. Growing up, we know that you ran into issues once you got into the pros, but just growing up, did you have issues with muscle pain, cramping, rhabdomyolysis, which is the fancy term for this muscle breakdown? Did you have issues growing up, or was the first time that you really thought there was a problem was once you got into the professional ranks?
Looking back, I can see that I had problems. When you're going through it, you wouldn't have noticed any difference. Like everyone gets muscle cramps, everyone gets, fatigue, that type of stuff. But there were some moments where I was definitely having the rhabdomyolysis, I think, in my opinion. But it's something that you couldn't have known at the time, especially not knowing that MH would cause these things at that time. So, looking back, I had, at night my legs would cramp up and hurt, or I had to go to sick kids hospital for testing, that type of stuff. So, but I'm not sure if they really associated it with malignant hypothermia either. And elevated CK levels in the blood, which now looking back is kind of an indicator of muscle breakdown.
Okay, so you did have, so just to make sure everyone heard that, one of the markers of rhabdomyolysis is this LCK, creatine kinase, CK. And so you said that you did have that in the past?
I think some of the tests looking back, because going through the disability insurance, I had to go through and see all that stuff. And I think that was one of the things we talked about. So I think that was brought up. I'm not 100% certain that it lasted or not, but I remember going through the files with it.
Okay. So we have a comment here from Dr. Vermans. And I believe, did you speak with Dr. Vermans at one point?
I did, yeah, with one of her articles on the athletes. Yeah.
Yeah. And these articles, by the way, for everyone, are on our website. So if you go to ryr1.org and you go to the medical literature, you will see these articles. Now, they're very technical, but you might get a sense of what's going on. And Dr. Vermans writes here, some of them do indeed have larger muscles, and some of these other patients have also mentioned that they grow muscles more easily. So, yeah, the experience that you've had, Cody, is typical and certainly not unheard of. A question here that you mentioned the back injury when you were 19 years old. In retrospect, do you think that was RYR1 related, or do you think it was just bad luck, or you're not sure? Any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I asked Dr. Riazzi the same question. Could all this stuff that I was going through beforehand, the torn muscles, and I had 5 tears through my neck and shoulders my last year, and down through it my lower back, and just kind of random muscle tears, and she couldn't say for certain, so I don't want to say for certain. So obviously some of the issues that I had in the past, I think might be attributed to it. I have no idea, but there's no way for me to determine which way is which. There's a lot of things that can cause muscle tears. I've done a lot of research on it, obviously the last even before I got diagnosed with MH, so I always wanted to know what was going on, why I would tear these muscles easily. But it's actually very fortunate that I found Dr. Riazzi, and it was really a nice turn that she was in Toronto, because I was able to come home and spend time with family at the same time. But to have a, foremost authority right, where I grew up was a godsend.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing. That's another part of the story that's so amazing, that you somehow ended up finding this person who uh, is like I said, one of the world's experts. Dr. Bermans, who's online, would but we're talking about probably a handful of people in the world who have that level of knowledge, and so in some ways you got very lucky. You're from the Toronto area. That's where she works. It's really incredible. Let's see here. We have a couple more questions. They're coming in here. Dr. Berman says patients can contact her directly if they have any questions, and that she works closely with Dr. Riazi as well. So I believe we have Dr. Berman's contact information on our website. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome.
Let's see here. So someone wants to know, Cody, what sports, you mentioned that after you work out or exert yourself, you might take a dantrolene. The question is, what sports and what activities are you doing right now for fun, to keep in shape? What are the things that you can tolerate? What are the things that maybe you can't tolerate?
Some of the stuff that I like to do in the summer are bike rides, or I like to be on the water. So wake surfing is an easy one. It's not a lot of stress and strenuous, and even the falls aren't too hard on you. It's the one where you don't have a rope. You just kind of use the pull of the boat. But I actually also enjoy volleyball. It's not too difficult, but it keeps me moving a little bit, and try to play at night so it's not too hot out.
Great. Okay. Let me see here. Okay. I think there's a question here from Mike G. How do I look? I don't know what that's all about. Anyway, Cody, thank you very much. This has been fantastic. We had a great turnout. I think one of the main motivations for doing this documentary was to find a way to help educate people about all the manifestations of RYR1, and we have found that doing these movies has been a great mechanism for doing that. There's only so much you can do in writing, on the website. People are just very receptive to movies and the visual medium, and your story is a great vehicle to tell the story of RYR1. So I know it took up a lot of time. It was a lot of effort. It was a lot of phone calls. But thank you for doing it. Thank you for Marcy and Jackson Epstein for participating. They were fantastic. Avi Swerdlow was very helpful. Avi's a member of the community. I see he's online. Avi was a great facilitator who introduced us to Jason, the director, who did a fantastic job. And it's really been a great experience. And I feel very lucky to have met you, Cody, and continue to work with you. And it's been a lot of fun. I'm sorry that we're not going to be doing the family conference, but we thought doing this Zoom session for the community would be a nice way for everyone to get together. And with that in mind, I was going to ask, and I talked to Nicole, I wanted to get permission from Nicole before we did this, and she said it's okay. If people want to turn on their videos, we can try to get everyone who's on the Zoom session right now all up. There's Marcy Jackson. Hey, there's Nicole.
Yeah, everyone should be able to unmute themselves and turn on your videos now if you'd like to.
So if you want to be seen and heard, now's your opportunity. Nicole has given us permission. Oh, hey. And
hi, it's David. Type in.
Oh, hey. So anyone else? It's Dr. Vermans. Thank you very much for joining us all the way in the Netherlands. By the way, the reason why we did this at 3 p.m. including people in Europe. Dr. Vermans, is there anything you want to add? Do you have a microphone?
I think my microphone is on now.
Yeah, we hear you. We hear you.
Okay. I just added a few things. I'm very happy with the video, not only for patients, but also for the medical students. So I will use it to teach my students this disease. And then again, concerning the advices for training, there are two things to add. It's not only the warm weather, but it's the fact whether or not you can lose the heat you're producing. So it's warm weather in combination with warm clothes. So even if it is very cold outside, if you overdress, you can still have a problem. So it's making sure you're able to lose the heat you're producing. Then concerning training, you should not take exercises, which means that you shouldn't contract your muscle when it's lengthening. And when you go to a CrossFit studio, for example, eccentric exercises are very popular because they make your muscles grow very quickly. But I think you should not do anything a RYR1 mutation because it has a high risk of developing rhabdomyolysis.
That's actually how I hurt myself.
Okay.
The original. That's how I tore my multifidus, was doing the CrossFit stuff.
Yes, I'm not a fan of CrossFit. I think biking is better. We all do it in the Netherlands.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Dr. Bermans, while we have you online, there was a question we got about CK levels, elevated CK. Is that always a sign of rhabdomyolysis? Can it be elevated under normal circumstances in someone with RYR1?
Well, overall, we talk about rhabdomyolysis only when the CK is above 10 times the upper limit of normal, which is approximately 2,000 for women who are white and 3,000 for men with the white skin. For black people, the CK is normally higher, so rhabdomyolysis is also only occurring when the CK is higher. But I think if all players in the hockey team of Cody were tested after a game or 2 days after a game, they would all have hypercycemia or mild rhabdomyolysis because of the physical damage occurring to the muscles. So I think if his CK would not have been high intermediately in the past, I would have been surprised, because if it was in the time he was playing ice hockey, it was probably high. Overall, if you have a high, in case of a mutation, some mutations are associated with a high CK level throughout, and there might be a risk of developing a rhabdomyolysis, but in between it might also be higher, but in other mutations, it is normal.
All right. Well, very, very helpful. Well, I'm looking, I see so many familiar names. It's great to see so many people logged in. And I hope everyone enjoyed this, and I hope we can do something like this again. But once again, thanks to Cody for everything he's done. This has been tremendous. So thanks, Cody. Thanks, Dr. Bermans. Thanks, Nicole, everyone, Jackson and Marcy, everyone who's been involved. It's been a great experience, and I think just that we did this is evidence of the value of the documentary. So thanks a lot, and strength in numbers, and everyone stay well. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
You kill us.
Bye. Thank you.
All right.
Press the screen. Tap the screen.
Right, we're good.